Welcome back and welcome to my media book freakout tag. I am filming this a little bit late, and you might also note that I'm doing it again. This is my revised version because I pre-filmed the other video that I made, which is still legitimate, it's just a bit outdated because I was on my honeymoon, so I had to pre-film it months in advance. So I feel like it doesn't give a neat capture of what my up-to-date reading has been, so I thought I'd run through rapid fire of all the questions again and see if they are the same or they're different. I've looked at a few and they had different answers, so I'm anticipating that they will vary. So the first question is the best book that you've read so far in 2024. And I must say I'm leaning towards my reread of The Way of Kings so far because I'm almost finished with, the first book in the Stormlight Archive, and I'm really enjoying my reread. I've been like an excitable golden retriever talking to Dave about this book and going, oh my god, do you remember when this character did this and this is coming up in this next scene, and I'm feeling so emotional. I've already cried like 3 times in this book. What is going on? So I'm really loving my reread of the Stormlight Archive. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of, mediocre and just okay, enjoyable books and just 2 stars as well reads over 2024, which is very frustrating because, I don't want to just reread books that I find amazing. I want to discover new ones. But at the moment, for the best book that I've read so far this year, it's probably going to be safely cornered in my reread section with the Stormlight Archive. Question 2 is the best sequel that you have read so far in 2024. And I know that I talked about a new series that I'm loving, which is Wolfsong, in my first video of the Media Freakout tag, but in this video I wanted to talk about a reread that I've done, again with the rereads, and that is The Blood of Olympus, which is the 5th book in the Heroes of Olympus series, and it's the sequel series to the Percy Jackson books, so it does feature crossover characters whom I loved seeing in this series, and it also featured obviously new characters because we follow Jason, Leo, and Piper, and they are part of the Quest of 7, which are trying to save the world from what is happening to the gods, because the gods have just stopped talking to everyone and no one knows why. It's quite unusual. So there is a whole plot with a ancient evil and trying to rectify the gods to who they were again, and these 7 going on a deadly quest together, and the stakes are just so much higher in this series. But what also makes it not only, book 5 being a great sequel, but all of the others being a great sequel, is that I reread these for the first time in literal years, so I had forgotten so much, and I read them on my honeymoon while I was actually visiting the ancient sites that were mentioned in this book. Like, that's where these characters were, the Parthenon, the Pantheon, the Acropolis, all of these fantastic ruins, and I was like, this is insane in the best way to me. These characters are about to land in Rome, and my flight just said, in an hour we'll be touching down in Rome. Like, this is so cool. So if you are going overseas at any point in the future, make sure you try and reread these while you're physically there, because seeing everything made me really appreciate the intensity and the environment and just the magic and the world building of this series. And I feel like that's how Rick Riordan got inspired to write this series. Just being there and absorbing everything and reading about all of the history and the mythology. I was like, I want to write my own series, but reading this was probably better than that. So I'm glad to report that I had the best time with these. Question 3 is a new release that you haven't read yet, but you want to. And I'm reading this a few days before The Sky on Fire releases by Jen Lyons, which is an author that I quite enjoy reading from, even though I feel like I really need more of her characters from the Ruin of Kings or the Chorus of Dragons series. I'm like, please give me more. I'm keen to read her new standalone fantasy book, and it's got dragons, it's got a heist, it's got an unwilling hero in it, and I'm like, sign me up, I'm there. I've pre-ordered it on audiobook, and if I like the audio, then I'll probably buy the physical book because, it's got to live with my Chorus of Dragons books, or I will feel personally incomplete. So I hope that it's good. I just really hope. Ironically, question 4 is the most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So can I just say Sky on Fire? I want to, but I know a few others that I'm anticipating. So one of them is Brother Song, which is the 4th and final book in the Wolfsong or Green Creek series. And you know me, I'm obsessed with that series. I love my queer werewolves with their emotional support and fan family and intense action scenes and just all their feelings. I just love it. It kills me. It kills me. And then moving from that series that just emotionally is the best series to me ever, I'm loving obviously my reread only of book 1 at the moment for the Stormlight Archive, but book 5 comes out in December. So I'm trying to prepare myself, and I just re-downloaded the audiobook for The Words of Radiance, which is book 2. I forgot how long the audiobook was. It is 48 hours long. Thankfully, I listen at double speed, but that's still a day of my time without stopping, without breaks. That is a whole day of listening to a book. So hopefully I can break that up going to and from work, because that is a lot. That is a lot of reading. That is a chunk of a month taken up by listening to this audiobook. It would probably be quicker for me to physically read, because I physically read faster than I listen to an audiobook, but I haven't been finding time to sit down and read. So it might be the quickest method for me to sit down and listen to 24 hours of an audiobook in anticipation of the 5th book coming out in December. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Probably just struggle. Which seems to be the way I go about all of my reading, at least lately. Oh, in terms of other releases, I almost forgot this one, and I would have hated myself if I forgot it. The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. They are publishing this book in August, I think early, like the 6th of August or something, and it's another male romance rom-com like Red, White and Royal Blue, which, it has my heart. I'm so keen to read it. So yes, I've got exciting things coming up in the second half of the year. The conclusion to the first chunk of the Stormlight Archive, which will be an epic fantasy series. I've got dragons with the Jen Lyons book, and then I've got romance, and I've got werewolf romance, and I'm like, I'm just so hyped and so pumped for all of the books that I'm going to read and hopefully love the end of this year. And now it's a pivot, because question 5 is the biggest disappointment of this year. And I talked about, I think, the Fragile Threads of Power, potentially, and the Atlas Complex for my previous video. So I'll try and deviate from those ones, because, I gave both of those 2 stars, which is disappointing, obviously. But then I also tried reading Foundry Side. I finished this one and I gave it a 3 stars, but it was very slow moving in the pace, and I will link my wrap up in both the cards and the description, so I can talk more about this in detail without taking time away from this video. What you need to know is that I was a bit underwhelmed by it. And then I tried reading City of Blades, which is the sequel to City of Stairs. And this is a companion book and a sequel, because there is a time skip of a few years, and we follow a companion character from book 1 who is now the protagonist in book 2, and it's supposed to detail this cool murder mystery where there is lore of the world and the old gods being uncovered in this particular section of the world, and there are warring tribes and political intrigue occurring at the same time. But this main character is more of like a bull in a china shop. She just wants to get in there, cause violence, shake down people and get answers. And I just did not like both her style of interrogating and investigating, nor did I like the way that this was written, because even though the first book felt like a slow burn to all of the key information, it was enough to kind of pull me along with it. Whereas with this one, it just feels like I'm being deliberately ignored. Like I'm in the room and things are happening, but people aren't being as straightforward or forgiving or giving of information as I'm hoping they will, and it's making me feel isolated from the book, and I don't feel emotionally connected to it. So I gave this 32% of a chance. That's how far I got into it, and then I was like, I'm gonna put this down. I don't feel like I'm enjoying this at all. And I tried reading it 4 or 5 different times, depending on how my mood was, whether I was tired or not. And it just turned out that I was not enjoying myself. This one had to go. Pretty disappointing, given that I gave the first book in that series or that trilogy a 5 stars, and I was expecting to enjoy that one and give it at least a 4 or 5 as well. So that would be my biggest disappointment, at least so far, but it's more up to date than my previous video. Question 6 is biggest surprise. I don't really have a biggest surprise. I would put this hand in hand almost maybe with biggest disappointment, because I was reading Late Bloomer, and this is a sapphic romance about a woman named Opal who is working a dead-end job, is a people pleaser, kind of hates her life, and people are walking all over her. But then she wins the lottery and she's like, I want to pursue my artistic passion. And she goes and buys a flower farm, and then realizes that she's been partly swindled. The deed that she bought is the real deed, so she technically legally does own this flower farm, but in the will, this grandmother left the flower farm to her granddaughter Pepper. And so Pepper's like, well, I should own this farm. Now Opal is like, well, I don't want to take your home away from you. So they have to try and figure out this middle ground and get along, and Pepper wants to pay back the debt. So it was a great foundation for a story, but personally I feel like the pace of it was very sped up. I couldn't feel like I was sitting in moments and events in the story without the need to stop and go to the next one. It was rushed to me. I did like the interaction of the characters, but I feel like it needed a bit more development and growth spread through the book for me to appreciate their scenes together. Don't get me wrong, it was enjoyable, but I was expecting it to be a 4 or 5 stars with that premise, and then it only ended up being a 3. So that was my biggest surprise, but it wasn't a positive surprise. It was just I was expecting to love this, but I'm a bit underwhelmed by it. So I feel like that answers the question. Even though I wanted to be positive, I'm finding it really hard to find good books. Question 7 is favorite new author who can be a debut author or new to you. I can't remember what I said in my other video, so I now just have to pants it, and I don't have an answer in my mind that's immediately coming to me. So I feel like this question is few and far between, unfortunately. I want to say Rick Riordan, even though I know that, he's written a lot of stuff and I've been rereading it, but he did publish a new book in the Percy Jackson series, and I went into it with a bit of trepidation, like, is this gonna be good? I'm worried. And it turned out to be great. So I love how he managed to encapsulate old and new readers and enjoyment without it feeling like he was rehashing old ground just to catch you up. He had a very great balance, and you can really see his experience in that book. And the next one in that series comes out in September, so I guess that would be another anticipated release that I'm looking forward to. I guess I could say that I like Jen Lyons as an author, but I don't know how I want to express that and how strongly, given that I haven't read her next book. So I might just keep that in the wings for now and then see how I go with her next book. Question 8 is newest fictional crush, which I always find weird. I don't have one. I appreciate a lot of characters that I read about, and I feel connected to them because of, their plight, but I don't have a crush on anyone. I feel like that is if you are 15, you have a new fictional crush, because, I definitely did. It's all in the imagination. Now I'm like, oh, that character's cool, and that is okay. I'm happy with that. Question 9 is newest favorite character, which again is really hard. I did talk about this in my June wrap up about this volume of Fence, volume 6, and I wouldn't say that they're my newest favorite character, but I'm just adoring the slow burn in here between Seiji and Nicholas. So I'm really appreciating their character development both individually and together, and their rivalry as well. I'm really appreciating the emerging nuances with their characters. We got to see a bit of backstory in this volume about Nicholas, so you see a bit more context and how he wants to push for things and be understood, and Seiji had a newfound appreciation almost for what he's doing and how fast he's learning. So I really liked seeing that develop in this volume. So as far as characters go, these are the ones that pop to mind when it comes to appreciating them and wanting them to grow and just understanding them. So I guess that's an answer. Question 10 is a book that made you cry, and I feel like I can just talk about Kaladin from The Way of Kings, because 3 times rereading The Way of Kings. I've read it before because this is a reread. I still cry. So he has definitely made me cry. And hand in hand, he would also be a favorite character of mine. But because he's been a favorite character for a while, I feel like I couldn't put him as the only one for question 9 as the answer. So I needed to put him in, yes, question 10, he has made me cry. And I don't know about you in terms of when you're reading something, what will make you cry, but for me it's not only necessarily sad things in the book, it's things like small emotional connection and interaction, and often expression of loyalty. So that kind of stuff just gets into my heart and nestles in there, and I'm like, oh, I feel all the feelings because these characters care for each other. So that is also what makes me cry. And seeing the characters in Bridge 4 in Kaladin's story, that's what made me cry. It is very well earned because it's obviously built up over a book that's 1,000 pages long. So when you see that, you feel very gratified. Question 11 is a book that made you happy. Is it sad that I don't know immediately what I want to say? I feel like because I'm in the thick of winter right now in Australia, a book that would make me happy is usually a rom-com or a romance, but I read more of that with my mood when the season is warmer. So I want to say a romance title, but I haven't read one in a while, so I don't really have one for this question. Hopefully when the pairing publishes, that will be my answer. That is what is going to make me happy. Question 12 is the most beautiful book that you have bought or received this year, and I haven't been doing many book hauls. I've actually got my physical to be read pile down to absolute 0, which blows my mind. I did a separate video on a few tips and tricks of how I did that, and so that means I haven't hauled anything for a very long time. I have had a few audiobooks though, and of the audiobooks, the cover that is sticking out in my head is called The Phoenix Keeper, which I believe is a sapphic fantasy romance about a woman who is a phoenix keeper, and the phoenixes at this zoo, this magical zoo, are beginning to die out, and she wants to reinvigorate their breeding program, but she has competition with the breeding programs because the griffins, which is run by this other woman, they have priority, and she needs to kind of boost herself up to the griffin woman's level. Anyway, I think it's like a rivalry or enemies to lovers thing, and it's got a growing appreciation, I imagine, of the phoenixes and the griffins and all of the magical animals. So I'm really looking forward to reading about their ridiculous rivalry and magic and creatures involved. Like, that sounds so fun, and the cover just looks really beautiful, and also, you know, bright oranges and yellows. So that one, I think for the Australian release date, is coming out August, but it might already be out in other countries, so people have probably read it. I'm just behind the curve on this one particularly. And then the last question, number 12, is what books do you need to read by the end of the year? I've read them. Well, I haven't, because I did finish my physical to be read pile, which is a hell of an achievement, but I also have a few books on my Kindle that I would love to have read. Whether I do or not, I'm not too fussed about it because it's my Kindle, but I do have The Will of the Many by James Islington that I would like to finish. I also have the rest of the Stormlight Archive that I would like to finish. Somehow, if I get through the audiobook of The Words of Radiance, I would like to reread Oathbringer, and then I would also like to read Rhythm of War, which is the 4th book. So, you know, I'm up to date by the time the 5th book comes out. At some point, I feel like I would really love to revisit Robin Hobb, because I just stalled my reread on book 2, and that takes a lot of time to read as well, and I hate the audiobooks, so I'd have to do that physically. So 2 rereads and then my Kindle are my priority. I need to cap it there, otherwise I'm going to be unrealistic. Oh, actually, no, I will add one more reread because I want to reread Fourth Wing and Iron Flame before January, which is when Onyx Fire, maybe it's called, comes out. We'll see what happens. I don't know yet, because my mood dictates my reading, and my mood is always all over the place, especially dependent on the season and what might be available at my library. You never know. So that is the end of this revised mid-year book freakout tag. Thank you so much for watching this video. Come and let me know what you're currently reading or what you want to read for the rest of the year. I would be interested, but thank you so much for watching this video. I'll come chat to you in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.